Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Day of Action for Green New Deal. Hi, I am Day Bradshaw. I'm a community organizer and an activist who's been working in the realms of racial and gender justice since I was 14 years old. And then I joined the Sunrise Movement in early 2019. So I use my background in racial and gender justice to make sure that we're creating a just and equitable climate movement for all, which is why I'm so passionate about Sunrise, because that is the main spiel. It's not just about the changing climate, it's about how it's going to affect all of us in all of our different identities and intersections. So what we're doing today. I'll be your host for the evening, but primarily we're here to hear from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. We're going to have Varshini Prakash, who is the co-founder and executive director of the Sunrise Movement and the recent appointee to the Sanders-Biden task force on the climate crisis. We're also going to hear from Catherine Coleman Flowers, who is the founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, which seeks the implementation of best practices to address the reduction of health and economic disparities, improve access to clean air, water, and soil in marginalized rural communities. And she is also a part of the task force on climate. So, for my notes. We are in a, how do I put this? Tumultuous, beautiful, history-making, history-changing time right now. The most important aspect of the Green New Deal to me is its interthematic emphasis on justice, and not just climate justice, economic justice, and racial justice. And not only is it generative, but the Green New Deal is one of those once in a lifetime pieces of legislation that's also reparatory. Right now, there are hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people all over the world crying out for justice against the systemic brutalization of Black people by police, and moreover, by an entire system that allows that brutalization to continue with impunity and without punishment. I started my work in racial justice after Trayvon Martin, and not only after his death, but specifically after his murderer was just left to roam free and there was no justice. And we see now with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and countless others that there is no justice. And I thought about opening this event today with a moment of silence, and very quickly decided not to because I was at an action, and that cemented the fact that we have had enough silence. And it is time to scream, and it is time to shout and to march and to fight to bring massive, sweeping change coming out of this crisis. Because we all know that if we don't, it's going to be more of the same. And as always, Black people and Indigenous people and other people of color will continue to be hit first and worst by the aftershock. And that's why we need representatives like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Congress fighting for change. And we need everyone to know that change is possible, that this is not a pipe dream, and that we have the frameworks. It's just a matter of getting the votes to make it happen. So today we're going to hear from the Congresswoman and Varshini and Catherine about why the GND is such a crucial step, not only to climate justice, but to racial justice and to economic justice, and why we need it now more than ever. And then we're going to start to put in the work right here, right now. So after we hear from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, we'll transfer to another Zoom room where we'll have a breakout session on training to phone bank, and everyone will get the chance to make some calls and spread some knowledge. Sound good? I'm used to talking to this Zoom thing is not. I was waiting for the reaction. It's fine. So first we're going to hear from Varshini Prakash.
Thank you so much for that, Day. I really appreciated that introduction. And hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be with you all. My name is Varshini, and I am the executive director of Sunrise. Hi, Catherine. It's good to see you as well. So right now, y'all, I feel angry. I feel enraged. I feel scared. I feel in grief. I feel uncertain. I feel hopeless. I feel responsible. I feel determined. I feel resolute. I feel inspired. I feel connected, and I feel love. I feel all of that at once, and I feel like I'm about to burst. And the only thing that I can do is put every atom in my body into loving action to make sure this moment does not pass us in vain, and to make sure that this does not happen again in this country. So thank you for being here. Thank you for moving your body and your mind and your spirit into action, because we need you right now, because there is a lot on the line. And as Day mentioned, this is life and death. To me, when I think about a Green New Deal, it is not different than many of the calls for a better future that we are witnessing in the streets right now. It is a manifestation of a future where love prevails, where equality is the order of the day, and where justice and opportunity rule. And the Green New Deal is the vision of tomorrow, where our Black siblings never again choke under the knees of police or from the fumes of pollution, and where our Indigenous families are free from snaking pipelines, and we have restored a relationship to the land and its original protectors, where our migrants have a home in which they can rest from the drought and famine that plague them, where we can all breathe life giving air and drink life-giving water, where nobody is left behind, and we are all moving forward together. So to me, a Green New Deal is the vision of tomorrow, where we move our communities towards life, not policing people towards death. We are talking about good jobs for anyone who needs it. We are talking about access to medical care, affordable public transportation to reach our loved ones and our homes and our jobs. We're talking about a good, clean home for anyone who needs one, protected from the ravages of climate disaster. And that vision is right in front of us for the taking. And on so many days, I can feel it. I can taste it. I want it. I can feel the glow of the world when we have won. And on some days, I feel so far away from that future. Many days in the last few weeks. And when I see Donald Trump saying things like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and puppeting people like Bull Connor, the segregationist commissioner from Birmingham that turned dogs and fire hoses on Black folks, when I see him blaming what's happening in this country on radical left anarchists, and when I see white nationalists parading around our country like it's theirs, that's what makes me retreat a little bit and feel scared and so far away from the future that we so badly need. But what gives me hope right now is that we literally right here in this digital room that we are in have the power to elect a new generation of people who refuse to play by the rules, right? Who have come out swinging for our communities. We have the power to elect Donald Trump's worst nightmare to office. We have the power to elect Mitch McConnell's worst nightmare to office. And it can be done by the might and energy of people power. And so I am so proud to be sitting here alongside Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, because you know what? She has been there since day one for us. On her first day, literally, on her first day as a Congresswoman-elect, Alexandria was there when Sunrise was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's office calling for a Green New Deal. The night before that event, when 200 Sunrisers were sitting packed in a church outside of DC, making up plans for how we were going to take action the following day, the Congresswoman-elect and Congresswoman-elect Rashida Tlaib visited our training, and she stood on a table and gave us the pump-up speech of a lifetime. And I don't know whether it was from exhaustion or what, but I just could not stop crying, because I had never seen a politician who was willing to take a risk like that and join us in lifetime. And I couldn't even communicate what that meant to me as someone who'd grown up seeing 6 feet tall guys in fancy suits and slick back hair be in power my whole life and never feel like those people ever spoke to me or what I cared about. So we all know Representative Ocasio-Cortez is a fighter for working people. She has been visionary. She has taken risks and many hits on behalf of our movement and remained so strong and steadfast and loyal. She has been a progressive lion on the issues. She is fearless and fierce every day that she has been in office. And we are here to have her back. And we are here to ensure that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is able to keep fighting on behalf of all of us. Because just having one of her in office has helped move our fight forward in more ways than we could ever even count or know. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Every call that we make tonight matters in races like this, where it can come down to just a few thousand or a few hundred votes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for throwing down. And we are going to need you every single step of the way. So thanks, and I'll pass it back to Day.
Thank you, Varshini. Ready to throw it down. So next we have Catherine Coleman Flowers, who is the founder of the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, which seeks the implementation of best practices to address the reduction of health and economic disparities, improve access to air, water, and soil in rural marginalized communities by influencing policy. So.
Hi, thank you for the invitation to be here. And I feel just this is a time of reflection for me. I'm probably older than most of the people that are on this webinar, but I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama, which is between Selma and Montgomery. And my parents were very actively involved in the civil rights movement. I remember lots of things that are happening that are very close to what we're experiencing now. And as a history teacher, former history teacher and a historian, I often go back and reflect on what happened before. And this period really closely parallels 1918 to 1920, when we experienced the last great pandemic, which was the Spanish flu, which is now H1N1. And in 1919, there was what they termed a race riot that was in Chicago, started in Chicago, but it spread to cities around the United States during the pandemic. So for me, I'm just doing a lot of reflecting about what is happening now, what happened then, what should have happened then, where we wouldn't be where we are now. Besides my work with the Center for Rural Enterprise and Environmental Justice, I also work with the Equal Justice Initiative. I'm the Rural Development Manager for EJI, and we have actually built the first ever monument, a memorial to peace and justice, which memorializes lynching victims in this country. And a lot of those lynching victims were victims of police violence or people like the ones that committed the murder in Atlanta. So we have to, I think we have to step back and reflect on how all of this is connected. On Saturday, I got news that a friend of mine, who was very much an activist, died as a result of the coronavirus. And it is, for me, Lowndes County, Alabama, and Montgomery have become the hot spots for the coronavirus in this state. And it's getting real because it's almost like it's knocking on the door every time I get a call. I hear about somebody else who's sick or in ICU. And I'm sure my brothers and sisters on this call that are in New York experience the same thing. It's very, very traumatizing. And to live in an area where people are being forced to go back to work and even being forced to sign agreements saying that the corporations or companies that they're working for will not be held liable if they get sick with the coronavirus while they're on the job. That is a very real concern for me because it sounds a lot like slavery. And these families are going back to communities that are environmental justice communities where in Lowndes County and other places, actually in all 67 counties in in the state of Alabama and other places throughout the United States where people are living amongst raw sewage, and they've been able to determine that the coronavirus sheds in feces, and the people living where they flush in the toilet and is coming back into their homes or is outside their homes. That makes them even more vulnerable because their systems are their immune systems are compromised. There are people that are living in Louisiana, especially in Cancer Alley, which I think is the heart of the fossil fuel industry. If you go there and see all the different plants, the multinational plants that are located there, creating despair for people in those communities that are experiencing also high rates of death to the coronavirus. Looking at Missouri and what's happening there, most of the people almost everybody that's died in St. Louis have been people of color. So there's a lot of frustration, and I think that this is a time for us to really do the work and to arrive at the solutions that we've been talking about for over 100 years. It's time for us to make sure that we have industry, if we have industries in these communities that provide clean jobs and that provide a clean atmosphere for people to live, that families don't have to burn up in mobile homes, that they have to leave every time there's a storm, and there's going to be more storms because of climate change. Right now, I just got a notice on my phone where there's today is the first day of hurricane season, and there's already a tropical depression that's formed in the Gulf. So that means that those same families that are fighting coronavirus, fighting for racial justice, and living in these environmental justice communities are going to be threatened again because of our excess, because we need to change the way we do things. And I am, for one, very happy to be part of a group of people, including Varshini and also call it AOC. And my daughter said to tell her that she loves her. But I'm just part of that's where I get my strength, because I don't know about everybody else, but lately has felt things have felt a little bit out of sorts. It hadn't felt right. And I still feel that we're not through it yet, that there are some things that we have to be mindful of, but we're going to have to be together and be encouraging to each other. Because when I hear people in political power in some of the highest offices in the country talk about a certain group instead of talking about the whole problem, because they're not looking for a solution, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that in my community, somebody sent me on Facebook where they filmed a group of guys in big trucks flying Confederate flags. And I'm sure they were loaded with their guns, and they went to the local Walmart. I guess they wanted to make a show and try to scare people. But it's a new day. It's not the way it used to be. So I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen in the next few days. But this is an opportunity, I think, for us to, because when I sat back and I was thinking, should I go out there and protest? What's the best way for me to be able to do something to show my dismay? And the best way for my role anyway, and the role of a lot of the people that I'm working with, is for us to craft the type of policy that get at the root of the structural racism that is in this country. And we see it pervasive, especially through environmental justice issues that are happening, because it's primarily in communities of color. So I am happy to be here. I would like to take a moment to introduce the person who comes after me. This is someone that I have been very, very, someone that I've greatly admired, actually. She doesn't know I've been to her office twice and left notes on the outside. Even when she first got in office and she was trying to articulate and raise up the issue of hookworm in Lowndes County, and they jumped on her because she was wrong about what she said. She didn't say it absolutely right, but she did more than the rest of them did. She at least acknowledged it. And the rest of them were trying not to acknowledge it. So what I ended up doing is writing her a note. I don't know if she got a chance to see it, because there were hundreds of notes that were out there, but I wanted her to know that we really appreciated her. and we want her to come down at some point. So I would like to introduce to you someone that needs no introduction. And I know that when my daughter mentions someone, and she can't mention most people in Congress, but she knows who AOC is. Mm-hmm. I'd like to introduce to you Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, Day. Thank you, Varshini, for just being a part of this and giving your time and your energy. It is so deeply appreciated. Your genius, your wit, your spirit. Thank you so much to the three of you. And I don't think that there's any better time for us to be talking about this than right now, because I've been reflecting so much on all of this unrest that we're seeing. And I was saying over the weekend that, there are folks that are dismayed at the violence and at the destruction. And the answer right now is not just about trying to identify individuals and actors. The answer is to end this, to bring peace. We need to end the conditions that created this eruption. We have to end, it is the conditions that create that eruption. So, when we talk about everything that's going on right now, we are at a culmination. 40 million people unemployed. Black men, Black women, Black trans and queer people are being brutalized by the police over and over in communities that are under-resourced, in schools that are not properly funded, and here in this environmental piece, in communities that literally cannot breathe even when there aren't police around, because they are dumped on disproportionately, because they are, policed disproportionately, but there are so many reasons why we can't breathe, because factories are being churned and power plants are being placed in Black communities because white communities don't want them. And so all of this is about equity and equality. And the simple demand that so many people have is to just treat our Black children and communities with the same cherished value that we treat white children in communities. That is it. We talk about police abolition, and people say that this is a radical demand. You know what police abolition looks like? It looks like a white, affluent suburb where the schools are fully funded, where courts look for alternatives to incarceration as much as possible, where people think about not ruining kids' futures. That's what an abolitionist world looks like. So we're just asking that Black and brown communities get the same abolitionist worldview that white communities get treated with. And when it comes to environmental justice, it's the same thing. I was there at Standing Rock, and I apologize if I'm just like kind of freewheeling, even though this is an environmental, we're talking about the Green New Deal today, but it's because it's all connected. It's all so corely connected, because this isn't just about rising up against, repealing 50A in the state of New York. That is part of the issue. But this is about rising up about the systematic injustices against Black communities and brown communities in this country, but disproportionately focused on a system of that is, an alignment of power and order that mirrors white supremacy. And that's what we have to transition out of. And so when we talk about moving through this moment, it's talking about environmental injustices, because I'm here and I'm seeing these things in the streets, and it brings me right back to Standing Rock. It brings me right back to when our Native brothers and sisters were putting themselves on a front line and being subject to police violence, back to Ferguson, back to Baltimore, back to the South Bronx decades ago when people were talking about these issues. And we will continue, these conditions will continue to create these problems until we transform in the direction of justice, until we transform in the direction and the acknowledgement of Black pain, and how this is not just a thing that happens, but this is a system that creates this output, this disproportionate impact. We cannot solve this problem unless we have systemic change, unless we have deep systemic change. And so I just thank each and every one of you for leading that systemic change, for ushering that systemic change. And I think it's also very important to say that, voting is not going to be the only thing that solves this problem. But it is one of the tools that we need to exercise to put the pieces in place. Because we have state legislatures, we have members of Congress, we have city councils that take money from people who profit from the existing order, from the existing violent structure. And so, because those folks are profiting from the current order, they give a kickback to the elected officials that prop it up. That is how this works. And so every election is an opportunity to replace our leadership with people who are divested, who are actively divested from individuals who profit off of the existing order. That is why this stuff is important. That is why I take it so personally that I do not take corporate PAC money, and that I do not take money from any entity or organization that I believe conflicts with the people's agenda and with the well-being of people, which is also why it's so important to me that we are funded by and we are supported by small dollar, everyday grassroots donations. And even if you don't have a dollar to give, you have time to give, you have energy to give, you have phone banking to give. And for that, I am so thankful. That is why these things are so important. Because when you have politicians that fund their campaigns in traditional ways, that have traditional support, you're going to get the traditional outcome. And the traditional outcome is not serving us. And so I thank each and every one of you who are out here doing the work, whether it's out in the streets, whether it's electorally, whether it is in peaceful demonstration, whatever it is, I thank you all for standing up in this moment. And this barnstorm is so incredibly important because we need to adapt and rise to this moment. As I said, this isn't about patronizingly telling people to go home and vote instead. One is not a replacement for the other, but they can be complementary actions. And let's get real. June 23rd, we have broad elections in New York State. June 23rd, you have an opportunity to swap out people who support punitive and violent measures with people who do not, with people who advocate for counselors, for people who advocate for social justice, environmental justice, from people who are divested from the system. And we cannot get the changes that we are looking for if the people who are elected in place, we see this all the way up to the White House, who we cannot get those changes if the audience is not there. And we need to elect the people that we rely on, that we think will listen to us best. People who are divested and people who share our agenda. And so that is why it is so important, June 23rd, that we go out to the polls, or if you'd rather, you can vote absentee, but I hope you're applying for your absentee ballot because you need to do it really soon, by June 16th. But either way, it's so important that we get people out to the polls to make sure that we get that audience for change, because there is a reason why 50A was not discussed and taken seriously in being repealed until today. That there's a reason for that, because the individuals currently in power did not prioritize it, did not want to take the political risk. And right now is the moment for elected officials who actually have political courage, and we need to send them there. We need to send them there to be part of the constellation of change. not in a savior type of way, not I'm going to send this one person and everything will change and I get to hang it up. That's not how this works. How this works is I'm going to send a partner and I got to do my work and my neighbor needs to do their work, because we need to heal the injustices. Because right now, Flint still doesn't have clean water. Because right now, people in Baltimore are still struggling. And as much as we talk about Flint, Black communities are having their water poisoned with lead across the United States, including right here in our district. In the Bronx, there are school districts that have had lead levels tested 19 times higher than Flint. 19 times higher. NYCHA. We're having children that still need lead abatement, that still need to deal with the consequences of being poisoned in their own public housing. So what we need right now is to get down to business. Yes, keep the pressure on. Don't let it up. But that doesn't mean we ignore our ballot boxes either. Because the moment we stop paying attention and the moment we don't show up on June 23rd, guess who will show up? All the people who are contrary to the values of our community. And so with that, I just want to thank you all so much for doing that real work. Thank you, Day. Thank you, Varshini. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to all of our volunteers who are here willing to sign up for a phone banking shift, because we got work to do. We got a lot of work to do. And in my humble, small role, which it is a small role, in my small role, my role is to raise hell in Washington, D.C. until we get people's water cleaned up, until their air is just as clean as any other air, to make sure that we don't get fracking pipelines put in through Native and Black communities, to make sure that we don't have ringworm or hookworm. Again, you called it out again. You said it was hookworm, then you said it was wrong. Damn it. So we say hookworm, and that we don't confuse these things, and that we visit our communities, because we need to make sure that these are injustices. People, Black Americans, walking through sewage in their housing communities because it's overrun and they're getting hookworm because of it. How is this America in 2020? How is this the wealthiest country? How? How is hookworm? How is people walking through their own feces in the United States of America acceptable? Why is it acceptable? And we need to dig deep. It's been acceptable because it's been Black Americans that have been enduring this. And the racialized power structures have taught us that things are less okay when white people are dealing with it. But if it's Black people dealing through the same thing, it's business as usual. That is the order we need to change. That is what all of this is all about. And we can do it. We can do it justly. We can move through this moment. We can do it safely. We can get a better future, but we need to fight for it. And that fighting work can be boring. It can be mundane, or it can be scary. I know phone banking for the first time is not easy. You deal with social anxiety. You're calling a stranger. That's the work. That's the work. It's not a big flashy television commercial. It's not standing up on a literal soapbox. It's the actual everyday work right here on Zoom. This is the work. This is the work of changing the world. And I want to thank each and every one of you for doing it. Thank you, everyone who's on the live stream. And thank you to everyone who's come together and joining us today. Sign up for a shift. Sign up for another shift. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your mental health. Take care of your emotional health, and take care of each other, because we are in this for the long haul.